Today's story took place in the small town of Sarasota, Florida, a resort town on the warm Gulf of Mexico, a cozy town where people felt safe until one event. It all starts with 11-year-old Carlie in the life, which like any child has various events. The girl's parents divorced long ago, but she continued to love both of them. Every weekend she spent with her father, flew to him in New York. But Carlie lived with her mother and stepfather. She was one of the most wonderful kids, kind and positive. And she always tried to give her eternal optimism to the people around her. She was that way because of her father. Carlie had blonde hair, blue eyes, and an upturned nose. Friends, relatives, and just others saw what a beautiful girl and what her character is. And everyone said that in the future she will become a famous model or actress. But relatives and Carlie herself could not know that unfortunately it will not happen. January 31st, 2004 was an ordinary day. Carlie and her weekend decided to go to a friend's house for the night. The girls did all the things that all girlfriends do when staying overnight at each other's house. They painted each other's nails, listened to music, and gossiped about their classmates. The visiting time flew by so quickly that the girls didn't notice how evening came. As is customary in all families Sunday night, the whole family was to gather and watch the Super Bowl game. Carlie really wanted to get home by then, and so she told her friend's mom that her parents were waiting for her at home and she could go home alone. The friend's mom was worried, but Carlie insisted and went home at 6 p.m. 13 minutes. That's how long it took to get to the street where the Brucia family lived. It was only 750 meters. After Carlie left, the friend's mom contacted the parents because she was worried and said that Carlie had left alone. Susan, Carlie's mom, was very worried about her daughter who had gone completely alone, even though the distance was only 2 blocks. So a worried Susan asked Stephen, her husband, Carlie's stepfather, to come out to meet her. Stephen immediately goes out to meet Carlie. They were to meet halfway and go into the store. Stephen always spoiled his stepdaughter, and the night before had promised before the match to buy her a bunch of sweets. Stephen walked the whole route several times, but couldn't find Carlie. She disappeared. From that moment, all the horror in the life of Carlie and her parents begins. The feeling of concern and excitement was not in vain, because in the future, they were waiting for events that will lead to the shock of the whole city. Stephen searched for Carlie for over an hour. He passed the route a few more times in the hope that he and Carlie simply went off on different roads. It became obvious that something had happened to her. After all, the distance between the houses wasn't that great, and the route was known to everyone. Susan and Stephen set out again to find Carlie. They walked the streets, drove through neighborhoods shouting loudly, looking for the girl by name. They looked through all the suspicious places such as a wooded landing, and at that moment they noticed something rather strange. A red tow truck was driving past them very slowly, and they decided to follow it. Susan and Stephen continued to follow the tow truck and saw that it was going to Carlie's friend's house, which of course surprised them. The same red tow truck that they had seen a little earlier was parked outside her friend's house that Carlie had come out of a couple hours ago and disappeared from. It was parked outside Carlie's friend's house. This struck the parents as odd. After realizing that Carlie is nowhere to be found, Susan decides it's time to call for help and calls 911. Usually, when an adult goes missing, police officers wait 24 hours before beginning a search. Searching for children always requires immediate action. So the officers immediately split into teams and began interviewing the family of Carlie's friend, as well as Carlie's parents, Stephen and Susan. Detectives scrutinized the route and the immediate area, but she could not be found. Stephen and Susan are desperate and don't know what to do. Friends of Carlie's family join the search. On all the walls and poles of the city can be seen flyers with a photo and the inscription "Missing Carlie." The next morning, something suspicious happened that made some people doubt Stephen, Carlie's stepfather. When he was handing out flyers at a local company, he asked one of the employees if he could buy illegal substances for him. The employees thought this was very suspicious because his stepdaughter had been missing for only a couple days. The employees contacted the authorities and told them about it. The detectives also kept an eye on Stephen, thinking he was suspicious. The police decided to call Stephen in for questioning. During the interrogation, Stephen stated that he was with Susan at home the entire time, and she also confirmed this. Moreover, when he was walking down the street to meet her from a friend, he was on the phone with Susan the entire time, which the phone records confirmed. Stephen reported that he did not find Carlie and walked Carlie's route for over an hour looking for her. After Stephen's alibi was fully checked, he remained a suspect. But Stephen remembered about a suspicious red tow truck that he and Susan had seen the day it went missing. Its owner was Ron Shokit. Ron had been dating his friend Carlie's mom for months. Stephen told police that he saw the truck driving slowly near a wooded area just after Carlie's disappearance and then parked near Carlie's friend's house. Investigators began to test that theory as well. They called Ron in for questioning. Ron reported that he had left for work before Carlie left and had not noticed anything unusual. The police also tracked Ron's movements that day, checked his alibi, and ruled him out as a suspect because he was at work at the time of Carlie's disappearance, as confirmed by his employer and surveillance cameras. The day after Carlie's disappearance, the police again decided to talk to Susan. She claimed in front of the police officers that her daughter had never run away before, and she had no reason to think that Carlie might have run away. However, the information that came from Carlie's friends diverged significantly from the version that Susan had told. Carlie's friend reported to the police that she had been extremely depressed and upset the previous day. In her conversations, she expressed reluctance to return home, claiming that there were too many responsibilities waiting for her there. This new information led law enforcement officials to consider the possibility that Carlie had decided to leave voluntarily. However, given her young age, investigators cannot completely dismiss the abduction theory. In an effort to provide complete clarity, investigators have asked Susan to contact Carlie's dentist to obtain dental records, which may be helpful if an identification is needed. The next morning, police officers enlisted police dogs in the search for Carlie. Susan and Stephen let the dogs' canine handlers into their daughter's bedroom. The dogs sniffed the bedroom linens and the girls' clothes and picked up the trail. They followed Carlie's intended route from her friend's house to her home. Carlie's tracks led police to a car wash, by which Carlie apparently wanted to take a shortcut. Near the back entrance of the car wash, the dogs lost Carlie's trail. Fortunately, the area was equipped with 2 cameras, one capturing the cars that were closer to the entrance, the other capturing the far area. Unfortunately for the cops, there were also blind spots that remained out of sight. Police realized that if Carlie was taken away by a criminal, it was unlikely he did it under camera surveillance. But they sat down to study the footage. The camera at the entrance didn't capture anything. Officers reviewed all the footage from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. that evening, but there was no footage. However, a second camera, which was in the far corner, managed to capture some interesting moments. At 6:21 p.m., it captured Carlie. She was walking with a calm stride towards the house. Carlie was wearing the same red t-shirt and blue jeans, and her hair was styled in a small bundle. Suddenly, a man appeared in the frame, white-skinned, stocky, of medium height, and with dark hair and a special mark, a tattoo on his forearm. The stranger was wearing dark blue work overalls with a name tag on them, as if he worked at a gas station or car service. The alleged perpetrator approached Carlie, said something, then grabbed her wrists and dragged her toward the camera's blind spot. This was probably the last person to see Carlie alive. Criminal or not, he should have been found as quickly as possible and found out what happened in that very parking lot on February 1st at 6:21 p.m. The horrible quality of the security camera footage made it impossible to see a face, much less a name tag on the man. There was only one hope: to involve the public in the search. The CCTV footage had been all over the news for 24 hours, and the footage had been published in the newspapers. They had to spread the word as much as possible. Perhaps someone could recognize a person by their shape, build, or gait. The police opened a special call center, hoping to get information about what had happened to Carlie, or at least some information from possible eyewitnesses. Within 24 hours, they received more than 700 calls. Operators recorded every statement, but they were all unsuccessful. Until, toward evening, they got the lead that led them to find the perpetrator. On Tuesday, February 3rd, police received a call from a man who said he knew the man in the videotape. The caller identified himself as his business associates. He said the man's name is Joseph Smith, and he is easily recognizable by his peculiar uniform and awkward gait. Police officers instantly grabbed a long-awaited lead. While operators continued to answer the phone, detectives ran Joseph Smith's information. The man came to Sarasota County from Brooklyn, New York in 2003. He was an auto mechanic by trade, was married but divorced twice. His 3 adult daughters were college graduates. The new suspect was 37 years old. He had a long criminal record, and his criminal history dates back to 1993. It was a variety of charges, including solicitation of minors. Joseph Smith, who suffered from back problems for most of his life, was seriously addicted to illegal substances. He had been arrested numerous times, including 3 times for assaulting women. At the time of Carlie's disappearance, he was on probation. One of Smith's co-workers reported that he had been acting strangely since Carlie's disappearance, and the day before had not shown up for his shift at all. He also reported that Smith had been using illegal substances. This co-worker confirmed that the man in the videotape strongly resembled Smith in appearance, demeanor, and clothing. Another co-worker also confirmed that the man in the videotape closely resembled Joseph Smith and reported that the day after Carlie was kidnapped, Smith showed up to work under the influence of illegal substances. Smith's co-workers said Joseph was having trouble at work because of illegal substances and debt. Police decide to once again review all of the car wash videos from just before Carlie's abduction to try to link the kidnapper to one of the cars passing or stopping near the car wash. Joseph's co-workers reported that he drove a brown Lincoln. However, at the time of the abduction, it was under repair. Of all the cars passing in the field of view of the video cameras, police considered suspicious a light-colored Buick station wagon that pulled into the car wash parking lot about 3 minutes before Carlie was abducted. The car stopped briefly in the parking lot and drove away. The quality of the video footage did not allow police to determine the license plate number or identify the driver. Police made the decision to go to Joseph Smith's home. Officers arrived at the home of Joseph's friends, from whom he was renting a room, as his wife had kicked him out of the house. Joseph opened the door with a surprised face and seemed shocked that he had been mistaken for the kidnapper. The police officers continued questioning Joseph, paying attention to the details of his alibi. Joseph insisted that he was at home enjoying watching the Super Bowl at the time of Carlie's disappearance, and that his friends could confirm his presence at the time. However, when presented with a video camera image of a man who strongly resembled him, Joseph suddenly admitted that the man looked like him. However, he insisted that he was at home that evening and could not have been in the area of the car wash. Detectives decided to conduct additional checks by asking Joseph to show his hands and roll up his sleeves. During this check, it was discovered that Joseph had tattoos on his forearm similar to those seen in the surveillance footage. Furthermore, investigators observed several fresh scratches on his face and hands. During further interviews with investigators, Joseph admitted that he had indeed borrowed the light-colored station wagon from his friends that day. However, he claimed that he only drove it to a nearby marina to enjoy the view of the water before returning home. The investigation continued. Police were certain of Joseph's involvement in Carlie's disappearance. However, the owner of the apartment from whom he rented, Mimi, confirmed his alibi, which confused investigators a bit. Police conducted a full and thorough search of Joseph's Lincoln, where they found several syringes, illegal substances, and spoons, and arrested Joseph for violating the terms of his probation. A few hours after Joseph's arrest, police were contacted by Joseph's friend and Mimi's husband, Jeff Pincus, and told that Mimi had mixed up the dates when she gave her statement. They stated that they had indeed lent him their car, but that he had not returned in the evening as promised, and had not arrived until just before morning. They also testified that before Joseph left, they zeroed the odometer, and after Joseph returned, they checked it and found that it had traveled more than 300 miles, and the car inside looked shabby. The back seat was down. The officers then asked Joseph's friends if they could remember what Joseph was wearing when he left the house. Jeff replied that he was wearing a mechanic's uniform. It was obvious to the police officers, but it was necessary to find indisputable evidence of Joseph's involvement in the case. The police got permission from Joseph's friends to search their house, where Joseph rented a room, but they found nothing that could prove Joseph's involvement in Carlie's disappearance. Also, police still couldn't figure out where Carlie was. Police searched wooded areas near where Carlie was last seen in the videotape. However, the search yielded no results. While the police were diligently searching for Carlie, one of Joseph's longtime acquaintances came to the police building at this time. He confirmed that the man in the videotape looked a lot like Joseph and also gave some very important information. The man said that Joseph had recently been talking about his growing desire to assault women. After this conversation, police officers transported Joseph from the jail to the station for questioning. Joseph walked into the interrogation room. He wanted to talk to his mom or his brother. The detective convinced Joseph to contact the public defender's office and have an attorney visit him. During this interrogation, the officers were never able to get anything out of Joseph, so he was transferred back to jail. There, he was finally able to talk to his brother John. What he told his brother confirmed everyone's worst fears. 5 days after Carlie's disappearance, Joseph's brother John decided to contact the police and told them a terrible secret. He showed the police where Carlie's body was. He directed them to the church on Proctor Road, in the woods. John revealed that his brother had confessed to the kidnapping and brutal attack on Carlie. John said that it was Joseph who had killed Carlie, beaten and finally strangled her with a shoelace. He confessed that he wanted to use sharp instruments, but was afraid he wouldn't be able to wash the car afterward. The confession was so cruel and disgusting that the brother simply could not express his emotions and was terribly shocked by such a terrible secret. Hearing his brother's secret, John thought that he had used forbidden substances or committed theft, but he could not think that he would reach such a point. Then, Joseph's mother also informed the police that her son had contacted her and confessed to what he had done. The police found Carlie's remains exactly where John had pointed. Carlie was clearly struggling and trying to fight for life. The cause of death was determined by the investigation to be strangulation. Detectives also confirmed that Carlie's body had been assaulted by Joseph. Forensic examination confirmed traces of Joseph's DNA on Carlie's body, as well as fibers of Joseph's clothing and hair. That is, the perpetrator's guilt was fully proven. In the car that Joseph borrowed from friends that day, 2 hairs belonging to Carlie and several fibers of clothing matching the one Carlie was wearing that day were found. Joseph was charged with murder. The defense attorney tried to argue that the police officers had framed his client, but Joseph's body fluids and hair were found on Carlie's body. According to the prosecutor's version, Joseph Smith had taken a shock dose of psychotropic substances that day. And then the public was outraged that a man with such a criminal past and such criminal tendencies came out of prison, where he had been imprisoned 13 times in the last 10 years, and why he was released so quietly. Also, about a month before Carlie's kidnapping, local authorities requested a Florida judge to issue a warrant for Joseph Smith's arrest based on a probation violation. However, the judge did not issue the warrant, citing that the police had not filled out the necessary paperwork. And thus went the reasoning that if this man had been shielded from society from the beginning, perhaps this terrible case could have been avoided as well. Little Carlie would be alive, and her mother wouldn't have to go through all these terrible events. The day everything was decided was October 24th, 2005. Joseph Smith was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection. He remained in prison awaiting his death sentence. Smith was also suspected in the 2000 murder of 25-year-old Tara Riley, who was found dead and naked in a pond behind a Walmart store, but that case was never solved. Although John, who opposed his brother in court, claimed that Joseph was the one who killed Tara, but he is a coward and cannot admit it. John was 100% sure that his brother is guilty of this too. John said, "My brother is the ultimate coward. All his life he has insulted and humiliated those weaker than him. He will never admit to what he has done, and if he is left free, who knows how many more innocent lives he will take. He's always been like this, which is why his wife ran away from him. But his parents believed to the last that he was a good man." On July 18th, 2017, Joseph's death sentence was overturned and a new bill was signed. According to it, the jury was to vote 10 out of 10 in favor of the death penalty. Joseph was to have been given a new sentencing hearing. However, it was postponed. Carlie's mother, Susan, as soon as she learned of her daughter's death, the grief-stricken mother began using illegal substances. The death of her only daughter was an unbearable loss for her. Susan tried to pull herself together. She helped the Children's Defense Fund and other parents in the search for the missing. With all her might, she tried to help others not to face such terrible events. After all, Susan understood what it was like to go through such an experience. But having learned that Joseph was going to be pardoned from the death penalty, and possibly subsequently released, Susan, after all, lost the meaning in life, could not stand it, and died, taking a lethal dose of forbidden substances. Smith was awaiting a sentencing review hearing scheduled for 2019 that could have saved his life. Joseph Smith was able to avoid the death penalty, But in March 2021, the Attorney General's office confirmed that he should have a new sentencing hearing. Smith died on July 26, 2021 in prison at the age of 55. The cause of his death still could not be determined. At the end of this story, we would like to say that the perpetrator took the life of little Carlie, ruined the life of Susan, Carlie's family and friends. He was also involved in other horrible crimes that can never be justified.